You know, when you're building an app, maybe Node.js, and you have things like database URLs or API keys,
Uh-huh. All those configuration bits.
right? And you end up needing different values for, say, your local machine versus the live server.
Exactly. Or even just sharing with a teammate. It gets messy if they're hard-coded.
And dangerous, right? Especially secrets like passwords or API keys. You can't just commit those.
Absolutely not. That's really where environment variables come in. They're all about pulling that configuration out of your code.
So the code stays the same, but the settings change depending on where it's running.
Precisely. Think of them like external settings managed by the operating system or the hosting platform.
Okay, so how does my Node app actually get those settings?
Node gives you a global object, process.env. It's automatically populated with the environment variables when your application starts.
Ah, process.env. So if I have an environment variable like port, I just grab it with process.env.port in my JavaScript.
Yep, it's just like accessing a property on an object.
Simple enough.
But a really good practice is to always plan for them not being there. Provide defaults.
You're right, so you don't crash if someone forgets to set one. Like maybe const port process.env.port 3000.
Exactly like that. Use the environment variable if it exists. Otherwise, fall back to a sensible default like 3000.
Makes sense. You could do that for, say, log level 2, process.env.loglevelinfo.
Perfect example. So reading them is straightforward. The next question is, how do you actually set them?
Yeah, how do they get into process.env in the first place?
Well, there are a few main ways. For quick tests or simple scripts, you can set them right on the command line when you start the app.
Oh, like 4080 nodeserver.js on Linux or Mac?
Exactly. Or set 408080 in nodeserver.js on Windows. It
Yeah.
sets the variable just for that specific process run.
Okay, handy for a quick thing, but
Yeah.
not really for development workflows or like production, right?
Right. For production, your deployment platform, think Heroku, Vercel, AWS, Azure, they all have dedicated ways to manage environment variables.
So you configure your database URL or API keys through their dashboard or config file?
Yep. The platform injects them into your application's environment automatically when it starts up. That keeps secrets managed securely.
Okay, production cover. But what about local development? Setting them on the command line every single time would be annoying.
Oh, totally annoying. And error prone. That's where the .env file convention comes in. It's super common.
.env, so just a file named .env in my project root.
Exactly. You just put your key value pairs in there, one per line, like port 5000 or database or your local dev string.
And this file, it probably contains local secrets, right? So rule number 1 must be add .env to .gitignore immediately.
You absolutely nailed it. That's critical. Forget that, and you risk accidentally committing your secrets. Always. Always get ignore.env.
Okay, .gitignore checked. But Node doesn't automatically read this .env file, does it? How does that content get into process.env during development?
Good point. It doesn't happen magically. You need a little help. There's a very popular package called dotenv.
.env, I've seen that. You install it with npm.
Yep, npm install dotenv. And then usually right at the very top of your application's main entry file, like index.js or server.js, you add one line.
Which is?
Required dotenv.config. That's it.
Seriously, just that.
Pretty much. That line tells the dotenv library to look for the .env file, read it, and load all those key value pairs directly into process.env.
Wow. Okay, so it makes local development way smoother.
Exactly. dotenv is primarily for development. In production, as we said, the platform usually handles setting the variables.
So recapping .process.env to read, defaults are good practice, set via command line, platform config, or locally with .env and the dotenv package.
That's the core loop. And the result is your application becomes much more configurable, definitely more secure because secrets aren't in the code.
And more portable, right. Easier to move between different environments.
Totally. It fundamentally changes how you think about building and deploying. It decouples the application logic from the environment it runs in.
It really makes you build for flexibility from the start.
Yeah, it does.
So here's something to think about then. If environment variables let you change behavior without touching code, how else could you leverage that? Beyond just basic config, like ports and keys.
Interesting.
Could you use them for, say, enabling beta features for certain users, or maybe controlling A/B tests, or even managing phase rollouts in production? How does thinking about configuration externally like this early on change how you design the whole system for scale and maintainability?